I've built things that last. 41 years as a general contractor in Central Ohio, and I can tell you with some certainty which materials hold and which ones don't. Concrete cures in 28 days. Wood warps if you don't account for moisture. And people, well, people show you what they're made of when the stakes get high enough. I just didn't expect the stakes to be my own chest cavity. My cardiologist, a careful man named Dr. Okafor, who has the unhurried manner of someone who has delivered bad news so many times it no longer surprises him, told me in February that my aortic valve had been narrowing for years, and that we were now at the point where waiting was the greater risk. Open heart surgery, he said it the way contractors talk about foundation repairs. Not optional, just a matter of when. I am 64 years old. I have poured more concrete than most people will ever see. I did not expect my own foundation to be the problem, but there it was. I told my 2 children 4 weeks before the scheduled date. 4 weeks. I want you to understand what 4 weeks means. It means 28 days. It means enough time to arrange a flight, request leave from work, find someone to pick up your kids from school, or simply drive the 2.5 hours from Columbus to my house in Marysville and sit with your father before someone cracked open his sternum. I gave them 4 weeks because I was raised to give people enough time to do the right thing. My son is 38. I will call him by what he is to me, which is my son, because that is the relationship, and the relationship is what matters in this story. He called me the evening after I told him. I could hear his wife in the background, the particular soft murmur of a household in motion. Dishes, a television, a child asking something. He said, "Dad, we'll be there. Whatever you need, we'll make it work." Then he asked in what I recognized as the voice he uses when he's about to say something he's been preparing, whether I had given any recent thought to the garage apartment above the detached unit. "Not pushing anything," he said, just wondering if I had thought about what I might do with it down the road. I told him I hadn't thought about it much. He said, sure, no rush." Then he said again that they would be there for the surgery and he loved me, and we hung up. My daughter is 35. She lives in Dublin, Ohio, which is close enough that she has driven past my exit on 33 at least 100 times without stopping. She sent me a text the morning after I told her. Long text. The kind of text that takes effort to compose and reads like an apology written before the offense has occurred. She said she was so sorry about all of this. She said work had been brutal. She said her husband had a conference that week, a thing she could not control. She said she would absolutely figure it out, Dad, I promise. She used the word promise. I noted that. She called 3 days later, and 5 days after that. Each call was warm and full of intention and almost entirely free of any concrete plan. She had a gift for expressing commitment without attaching it to a date or a time or an actual airline ticket. I have known subcontractors with the same quality, and they cost me a great deal of money over the years. I want to tell you about the morning of the surgery because I think it matters, and I have not said it out loud to anyone. I woke up at 4:30 in the morning at Riverside Methodist Hospital, where they had admitted me the night before. The room was that particular shade of institutional dark that is not quite night and not quite morning, lit only by the glow of monitors and the thin line of light under the door. I had a window, drew it, and could see the parking garage, and beyond that, a strip of Columbus skyline going pale at the edges. I lay there and I thought about the house in Marysville. The back deck I had built myself in 2009. The way the light comes through the kitchen window in early morning in a way that my wife used to call ridiculous, because it was almost too pretty for an ordinary Tuesday. My wife passed 7 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end. I mention this because after that, I thought I'd already learned everything there was to know about being alone in the hard moments. I thought I'd taken that class. I lay in that hospital bed at 4:30 in the morning, and I thought about what it would mean if something went wrong, not in a dramatic way, just in the plain arithmetic of it. Who would know first? Who would come? I thought about my son's voice on the phone saying whatever you need. I thought about my daughter's text with the word promise in it. Then I thought about the parking garage outside my window and the pale Columbus skyline, and I let it go. Because there was nothing to do with that kind of thinking except set it down. The surgery was 8.5 hours. Dr. Okafor said it went well. I woke up in the cardiac ICU with a tube down my throat that they removed while I was still mostly not there, which is, I am told, a mercy. I was in the hospital for 9 days. Cardiac surgery is not a thing you walk away from on day 2. There is a particular education that happens in those 9 days, and it is not the education you expect. My son called on day 1. He asked how I was feeling. I told him I was alive, which seemed like the relevant information. He said, "That was great, Dad, really great." There was a pause in which I could hear him thinking. Then he asked, gently, whether I had a copy of the deed to the Marysville property somewhere accessible. Just so he knew where things were. Just being practical, I told him the deed was in the filing cabinet in the study, 3rd drawer, labeled real estate documents. Because I am a contractor and I have been organized since 1987, and I will be organized until the day I am not. My daughter called every day for the first 5 days. I will give her that, but each call had the quality of someone performing a task on a checklist, warm but contained, and always with a reason why she still had not come. Day 2. It was the kids had a stomach thing. Day 3. It was her husband's car situation. Day 4. She said she was absolutely coming on day 6. Day 6 she did not come. She sent a voice message. I could hear road noise in the background, which means she recorded it from her car, which means she was going somewhere that was not Riverside Methodist Hospital. And she was telling me from the road that she was sorry and would explain everything. I listened to the voice message. I set my phone down on the tray table next to a cup of ice chips I wasn't supposed to have yet. I looked at the chair beside my bed. Every hospital room has one. This one was grey vinyl, the kind that wipes clean, with armrests warmed to a lighter shade on the right side from years of other people's hands. It had sat empty since I arrived. I looked at it for a while. There was a nurse on the cardiac floor named Evelyn. She was in her late 50s, compact and deficient in the way of someone who has been doing this long enough that efficiency is not a style. It is just how time works for her. On day 5, she came in to do my vitals at 6 in the morning and found me already awake, which she noted without comment. She checked my blood pressure. She checked my incision. She made a note on her tablet. Then she paused at the door and said, "Without looking up, I notice you haven't had any visitors, Mr. Callahan." I told her my family was in Columbus, which is true. Dublin is in Columbus. It takes 31 minutes on 33 with no traffic. She looked up then. She had the expression of someone who has heard the specific kind of answer that is not quite a lie and knows the difference. She said, "You press that call button if you need anything. Any time of night." I told her I would. She paused another second, and she came back to the bed, and she adjusted the blanket at the foot, which did not need adjusting. And she said, "You're doing really well." That was it. Then she left. I have thought about that blanket every day since. On day 9, Dr. Nye Okafor signed my discharge papers, shook my hand, and told me my valve was functioning beautifully. He said it with the satisfaction of a craftsman, which I respected. A volunteer brought a wheelchair to my room. I told her I could walk. She told me it was policy. We compromised in the way that hospital patients always compromise with hospital policy, which is that she won the argument and I sat in the chair. She wheeled me to the main entrance. The sliding doors opened onto a March morning in Columbus, which means it was 38 degrees and pretending to consider getting warmer. I called a rideshare from the curb. The driver was a woman named Priscilla, who had a pine air freshener and a Christian radio station playing low. She asked if I'd been in the hospital long. I told her 9 days. She said, "Lord have mercy, 9 days." I told her it was heart surgery. She said, "Lord have mercy" again, louder this time. And then she drove me to Marysville in a silence that felt like the appropriate response to the information. She helped me carry my bag to the front door. I thanked her. She said, "God bless you, honey," and meant it and drove away. I stood at the front door for a moment I cannot fully explain. My chest was aching in the specific way that surgical pain aches, like something large that has been rearranged. I had a bag with my hospital things. a folder of discharge instructions, a small orange pharmacy bag with medications I had written down and organized before I left because I am a contractor and I plan for materials before I need them. I went inside. The house was exactly as I had left it 9 days ago. I want to be careful about how I say this because it is not a small thing. When you leave your house for 9 days and no one comes, the house waits. The mail had stacked up in the box by the front door. The plant on the kitchen windowsill, a pothos that my wife bought in 2015 and that I have kept alive through nothing but stubbornness and occasional watering, had dropped 2 leaves. The coffee mug I had rinsed and set on the drying rack 9 days ago was still there, dry and waiting, everything exactly where I left it. No one came, not to check the mail, not to water the plant, not to walk through the rooms and confirm that everything was still standing, which is something neighbors do for each other after 9 days, let alone children. I moved through the kitchen slowly, the way your body moves when it has been through something and is still in conversation with itself about the terms of recovery. I put the kettle on. I stood at the kitchen window and looked at the back deck I built in 2009. The wood had weathered exactly as I predicted it would. I had used pressure-treated lumber and stainless hardware. It would outlast me by 20 years with basic maintenance. I looked at it for a while. I thought about the grey vinyl chair in my hospital room, the worn armrests, the 9 days it sat empty. I thought about Evelyn adjusting the blanket. I thought about my daughter's voice on the road recording that voice message, going somewhere that was not me. I made my tea. I took it to the recliner in the living room, the one with the side table I built 20 years ago and which has held approximately 4,000 cups of coffee without complaint. I sat down. The house was quiet around me in the way that a house is quiet when only one person is in it. Not peaceful, just shaped around an absence. I sat there for a while. Then I called my attorney. His name is Warren, and he has been handling my legal matters for 18 years. He is a deliberate man. He does not use 3 words when 2 will do, which is a quality I find increasingly rare and valuable. I called him from my recliner on a Tuesday afternoon in March, still in my coat because I had not gotten around to taking it off, and I told him what I needed. He was quiet for a moment after I finished. Then he said, "Are you sure about this, Lyle?" I told him I had been sure since day 5. He said he would get started on the documents. I thanked him and hung up. Outside the living room window, the maple in the front yard was still bare. March in Marysville is not optimistic. But the maple doesn't need to be. It comes back every year regardless of whether anyone is watching or expecting it to. 5 weeks after my discharge, I invited my son and my daughter to dinner, a Sunday in late April. I told them I wanted to see them, which was true. I told them I was feeling better, which was also true. I did not tell them what I had spent the previous 5 weeks doing with Warren, which was clarifying exactly what I intended to do with the things I have built and earned and saved over 64 years of living. I made pot roast. It is the thing I know how to make well, and I made it well. I set the table with the good placemats. I put on a Coltrane record because I have put on Coltrane on Sunday evenings since 1986, and I was not going to change that for a performance. My son arrived first. He does this consciously, I think. Arriving first is a way of establishing a kind of reliability. He brought a bottle of red wine and a handshake that became a hug, but lasted slightly longer than usual. Then, in the way that he has, his eyes moved through the room. The built-ins I installed in the living room in 2004. The fireplace surround I laid myself from reclaimed brick. Into the kitchen, the cabinetry I built to my own specs in 2011. It was not a long look, but it was a look I recognized. I have spent 41 years reading houses and I know when someone else is doing the math. "Looks good in here, Dad," he said. "Same as always," I said. "Right, yeah. Just it looks great." My daughter came 20 minutes later, breathless, carrying a grocery store cake in a plastic clamshell container. She is not a baker, and she knows it, and the grocery store cake was in its own way an honest offering, the kind that says, "I ran out of time, but I wanted to bring something." She hugged me for a long time. I could feel her relief at finding me upright. Then she sat down, and with the composure of someone who'd been rehearsing, she began to explain the hospital. I will not recount all of it. The main elements were the stomach thing that turned out not to be the stomach thing. The conference her husband could not miss, a situation with her youngest and the school that she could not get into over the phone. She used the phrase "I felt terrible about it" twice. I absorbed each reason with the attention of a man who has spent a career reading structural reports. Which is to say, I took it all in without comment, filed it in the right place, and drew my conclusions in private. I told her I understood completely. She exhaled. I passed the bread. My son, somewhere in the second half of dinner, found a way to mention very naturally that a contractor he knew had assessed a similar property in Marysville recently and said the market was stronger than expected. Just an observation, just something he had been thinking about from a practical standpoint, Dad, given that the house is a lot for one person. I said, he said, I'm not pushing anything. I just want you to have all the information. I picked up my fork. I've been doing some thinking too, I said. Since the surgery, about getting things in order. The table shifted. Small adjustments. My son put his fork down. My daughter looked up from her plate. Not dramatically. Just the way people adjust when something in the room has changed weight. I've been working with Warren on some things, I said. Just making sure everything is where it needs to be. My son said, That's really sensible, Dad. My daughter said, Of course. That's such a responsible thing to do. I said, More pot roast? After that, things unfolded with a kind of predictable momentum, the way a project moves once you have the permits pulled and the materials ordered. My son began calling every Sunday, not Sunday sometime, Sunday morning between 9 and 10, consistent as a subcontractor who finally understands that showing up on time is not optional. He asked about my health, my sleep, how the recovery was going. He was attentive in the genuine way and also in the performed way, and it was hard sometimes to tell which was which, and maybe that was not the right question. After 10 or 15 minutes of this, he would find a way to circle back to the house. Property taxes. Upkeep, whether I had thought about a home equity line. Just practical things. Just thinking ahead. My daughter started coming on Saturdays. She would arrive around 10 with a bag of groceries. Actual groceries. The brand of coffee I drink, a loaf of the good sourdough from the bakery near her house, occasionally something she had made herself. She was warm company. She asked real questions about my recovery, about the house, about what I was doing with my time, and sitting across the kitchen table from her on those Saturday mornings, I felt something I had not expected. Not anger, grief, not for the hospital, specifically, but for the version of her that was sitting here in my kitchen now, present and attentive and genuinely warm, and understanding that this version of her had been available all along. She had always been capable of this. She had simply not chosen it until the stakes changed. I drank my coffee and talked with her about her kids and her garden and the addition she and her husband were considering. I was warm. I was glad she was there. Both of those things were true at the same time. And I've learned in 64 years that true things do not have to be simple. My son, about 8 weeks after the dinner, asked if he could come by one Saturday to help with some yard work. He came. He worked hard. He did not bring up the house once that day. We worked alongside each other in the front yard for 4 hours, raking and edging and replacing a section of the fence along the property line. And when we were done, we sat on the back deck with cold water and he talked about his oldest starting Little League. And I talked about the summer I spent on a roofing crew at 19. And it was, for those hours, the version of us that I would have chosen if I had been given the choice. I did not tell him about Warren. I did not tell my daughter either. I gave them nothing to argue against, nothing to apologize for, nothing to negotiate. I just let things be what they were, which was this. They were showing up now. Late, but showing up. And I was receiving it fully, because I am their father, and that part of me does not have a filing system. The will, though. The will has Warren. It is a Tuesday morning in late June, and I am sitting on the back deck in Marysville with a cup of coffee and the newspaper, which I still get in print because I am 64, and I earned the right to make that choice. The deck I built in 2009 is doing exactly what I designed it to do. The joists are straight. The boards have weathered evenly. The stainless hardware has not corroded. 41 years of good work, and this is what good work looks like. 15 years later, it holds. My chest scar has faded from red to pink to something closer to silver. Dr. Moy, Okafor says the valve is functioning better than he expected, which he said with the satisfaction of a man who takes his work personally. I walk 2 miles every morning, more than before the surgery. The cardiologist says this is not unusual, that sometimes the procedure corrects a deficiency people have been compensating for so long they no longer noticed it. I find this interesting from a structural standpoint. A thing can be failing for years before the failure becomes obvious. You compensate, you adjust, you find workarounds, and then someone opens you up and fixes the actual problem and you walk better than you have in a decade. I made a donation last month to the cardiac care unit at Riverside Methodist, a specific fund for patient support, the kind that provides things insurance does not cover. I made it in Evelyn's name. I did not tell her. I did not tell anyone. There are some things that do not need an audience. Warren has the paperwork, has had it since March. The house on Maple Creek Road in Marysville, 4 bedrooms, the built-ins, the deck, the reclaimed brick fireplace, the kitchen I built to my own specs, the garage apartment my son keeps thinking about, will go to the estate and be liquidated for 3 organizations I spent considerable time choosing. The first is a veterans assistance organization out of Dayton. Men and women who held their post when no one came for them. I respect that more than I can fully say. The second is a skilled trade scholarship at Columbus State Community College. I started as a laborer at 19 years old. Someone handed me a level and told me to learn how to read it. That is the entirety of how I got here. A young person with the right tools and the training to use them is something worth funding. The third is a hospice organization in Central Ohio. Because I know what it looks like when someone sits with you at the end. I know what it costs them. And I know what it means when no one does. There is a letter, 1 page, written by hand in the same block print I have used on job site documents since 1987. It is addressed to my son and my daughter to be opened when the time comes. I will tell you what it says. It says, by the time you read this, you will have questions. I want to give you the accurate information because I believe you deserve it. I was admitted to Riverside Methodist Hospital on March 3rd for open heart surgery. I was discharged on March 12th. I came home in a rideshare. I had told you the date 4 weeks in advance. I do not write this with anger. Anger is a reaction. I spent 41 years in construction learning the difference between a reaction and a decision. This is a decision. The house is in good condition. The deck will need the boards resealed in the next 2 years. Southwest corner first. The roof has at least 8 years left if you keep the gutters clean. The built-ins are solid, 1/4-inch plywood backing, construction screws. They are not going anywhere. I love you. I have always loved you. That is not in question, and it is not in the document. What is in the document is a consequence, not a punishment. A consequence. In construction, we say that a structure performs according to its design. I designed my estate around what I know. And what I know I learned in a grey vinyl chair that sat empty for 9 days. Your dad, Lyle Callahan. My daughter came this past Saturday. She brought sourdough and the good coffee and the cutting from her garden. A hosta she had divided because she knows I have a shaded corner along the north fence where nothing much grows, and she thought this might work there. She was right. We planted it together in about 20 minutes, knees in the dirt, and she talked the whole time about her youngest starting kindergarten in the fall and how it was hitting her harder than she expected. I listened. I asked questions. I told her about the summer my wife and I planted the rose bed along the back fence, how we argued about spacing and she was right and I was wrong and the roses have been proving it every June since. My daughter laughed. She said, Mom was always right about the garden. I says, she was always right about most things. We sat on the deck with coffee after, and the hosta sat in its new corner looking tentative the way new plants look when they have just been moved. My daughter put her feet up on the railing the way she has done since she was 12 years old, a habit I never corrected because it never bothered me. She looked out at the yard for a while. Then she said, I'm really sorry I didn't come to the hospital, Dad. I'd been trying to find a way to say that for months. I looked at her. My daughter. her feet on the railing. The hostel in the corner. The deck I built holding everything. I know, I said. Not it's fine. Not don't worry about it. Just, I know, because it was true and because some things deserve to be received clearly instead of softened into nothing. She nodded. We drank our coffee. Warren has the documents. The hostel is planted. The deck is holding. And on Saturday mornings I am as available as I have always been, which is entirely and without condition because that is what fathers do and I am still one. The paperwork just handles the rest. It is a Wednesday morning now. July. The maple in the front yard came back the same as it always does. No announcement, no particular effort, just back. I am sitting with my coffee before the walk, watching the light come through the kitchen window at the angle my wife used to call ridiculous. She was right. It is ridiculous. Thin and gold and too pretty for an ordinary Wednesday. I built a lot of things in 41 years. Decks, foundations, custom cabinetry. A water treatment annex outside of Lancaster that took 14 months and is still standing. I built them carefully with the right materials for the long term, not because anyone was watching, because that is what the work requires. I did not expect, at 64, to be sitting in my own kitchen after 9 days alone in a hospital bed, understanding that I had spent decades applying that same standard to my family, and not everyone had been building to the same spec. That is all right. I have always known how to work with what's there. The walk is 2 miles. The maple is full. The valve is working. And somewhere in a filing cabinet in Warren's office, on 4th Street in Marysville, everything is labeled, dated, and exactly where it needs to be. I raise my coffee cup at the window, then I go for my walk. If this story stayed with you, hit the like button and subscribe to Dad's Pure Revenge. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I'll see you on the next one. I have been thinking lately about what it actually means to earn something, not in the financial sense, though that is part of it. I mean earn in the older, harder sense of the word, the way you earn the right to call yourself a craftsman after 40 years of showing up to job sites before anyone else and staying after everyone left. The way you earn a person's trust not by saying you will be there, but by being there, physically, in the chair, on the day. What happened to me in that hospital was not complicated when you strip it down to the materials. I had surgery. I gave my children 4 weeks' notice. They did not come, and what followed from that? The calls I made to Warren, the documents he drafted, the decisions that are now filed and waiting. Those were not acts of revenge in the way people use that word, dramatic and hot and meant to wound. They were acts of clarity. There is a difference, and the difference matters to me. I have watched both of my children in the months since, watched them show up on Sundays and Saturdays with wine and groceries and genuine warmth, watched them ask real questions and sit on the deck and laugh in ways that cost them something in the best sense. And I felt something I did not expect to feel, which is gratitude, not because they are performing for an inheritance they believe is coming, but because the version of them that is sitting in my kitchen now is a version I always knew existed. It just needed the right conditions to appear. That is not nothing. That is in fact a great deal. But here is what I have also learned, and I say this as a man who built things for 41 years and never once cut a corner that mattered. Consequences are not punishments. A consequence is just information that arrives late. When a structure fails, it does not fail because the materials were cruel. It fails because something was not accounted for. Not load tested, not built to the spec the job required. My children were not built wrong. They were just not tested until now, and the test results, 9 days of an empty grey vinyl chair in a cardiac recovery unit, were accurate. I filed them accordingly. What I want anyone to take from this, if they are taking anything, is that the measure of a person is not what they promise in a warm phone call when the stakes are abstract. It is what they do on day 1 and day 5. And day 9, when the stakes are real and inconvenient and require something from them they did not budget for. Character is not a feeling. It is a decision made when the decision is hard. I chose differently than some would choose. I know that. Some people, in my position, would have confronted their children directly, demanded apology, negotiated forgiveness in real time. I respect that approach. It is just not the one I was built for. I was built to assess the load, make the calculation, and build accordingly. quietly, without requiring anyone's permission or understanding. The deck is holding. The hosta is taking root. Evelyn's fund has been donated to. And Warren has everything in order. That is enough. For me, at 64, with a working valve and a 2-mile walk every morning, that is exactly enough.